Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining. My name is Douglas Brown, CEO at Halo Consulting. Halo is a certified minority-owned search firm based in Chicago, and we provide a variety of custom, scalable, talent-driven solutions for organizations in growth mode. Halo hosts virtual roundtable events like this one for HR and technology leaders on a variety of topics, and we hope you'll be interested in joining our next event. Today's event will be an interactive event between both the panelists and the audience. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. We will be sharing a survey to get your feedback after the event, and we will have a recorded version of this event available on YouTube. For now, I'd like to introduce our panelists and our moderator. So we are joined by Derek Gordon. Derek Gordon is the Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for Colgate-Palmolive. He's been in this role for about 9 months after operating in several commercial roles for the company. He previously ran the global toothbrush business, was the Vice President and General Manager for the Colgate-Palmolive Canada, and was the Vice President and General Manager for the North American Hub Care Division. Prior to Colgate, Derek held a variety of positions at the Clorox company to include the SVP of Marketing and General Manager for the Automotive Division. Derek has 30 years of CPG experience in marketing and general management. Next, we are joined by Maureen Greene James. Maureen serves as FTI Consulting's Vice President of Global Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging. Ms. Greene James leads the firm's effort to attract, retain, and develop diverse talent and maintain an inclusive culture. She plays a pivotal role in creating and leading the diversity, inclusion, and belonging strategy in partnership with the firm's executive committee and segment leadership globally. Maureen has held a number of leadership roles in the HR and diversity and inclusion space with Cognizant and PwC. Maureen is also the founder and president of MGJ Speaks, a career consultancy focused on developing strong women leaders to ensure companies continue to build a diverse pipeline of talent. Next, we're joined by Rory Trotter. Rory is the Director of Global Total Rewards at Brown-Forman. Over the last decade, Rory has led both business-facing HR and total reward teams responsible for the redesign and delivery of more than a dozen global compensation, health, and retirement programs. At Brown-Forman, Rory is responsible for enterprise global compensation, benefits, wellness, performance, and mobility operations for 5,000 employees in 40 plus countries. Prior to joining Brown-Forman, Rory was a director of global benefits and HR at Archer Daniels Midland, where he led global benefit function for the company's 40,000 employees in 70 countries. And then lastly, Loucious hires. Loucious serves as the director of the Office of Diversity and Equal Opportunity for NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. He is responsible for managing, planning, directing, and implementing a comprehensive equal opportunity program for the center. Most recently, he served as the Director of Outreach and Retention at the Department of Veteran Affairs in Washington, D.C. Loucious is retired from the U.S. Army and began his EEO career in 1997 as a Senior Equal Opportunity Advisor for the 7th Army Training Command in Grafenwohr, Germany. During his career with the Army, Loucious held a variety of leadership roles and supported Operation Desert Shield / Desert Storm and Operation Joint Endeavor. Loucious has more than 20 years of experience in equal employment opportunity and diversity, equity, and inclusion in the federal government, military, private sector, and academia space. And then I would like to introduce our moderator, Angela Williams. Angela brings over 20 plus years of HR experience in a number of industries for North America and global-based organizations. She brings expertise in many facets of human resources, including but not limited to talent acquisition, employee relations, human capital management systems, total rewards program, succession planning, talent management, L&D, and performance management. Angela's most recent role was the Senior Director of Global Talent and HR for Viad Corp. Prior to that, Angela was the Vice President of HR for Fifth Third Bank and Follett Higher Education Group. Before we get started, I'd like to open it up for any questions before handing it over to Angela.
They'd like to ask. So let's start talking about career growth. The question I'm going to start with, and Derek, I'll throw this one to you. Was there any specific training or development that stands out as making a significant impact on your career growth?
Absolutely. And I will say that for me, the most significant training was those informal moments that my bosses used to invest in my development purely for the purpose of my development. I will give you just a couple of anecdotes around that. When I was young, I was an officer in the Air Force. For a period of time, I was the executive officer, glorified admin, for a general officer. And I thought it really fascinating that periodically at the end of the day, he would pull me in his office, sit me down, and frankly, give me counsel, life lessons, whatever you want to call it, on how to be a great officer and how to make decisions in the Air Force. Useful tips that at the end of the day, I wrote them down. They are still very much part of my list on how you become a good leader. I had another boss at one point when I was at Clorox that after we'd gone through this really big negotiation with Frito-Lay, it was my first time doing that. I was on the Casey Masterpiece barbecue chip business, and we had a license with Frito-Lay for their barbecue chips. And after the negotiation was over, my boss called me in and sat me down and said, "Okay, Derek, what'd you learn?" And again, I took this as one of those moments that this is an investment purely in me, so that I could then sort of think about how I could learn, what was important for me to gather going forward. When I talked to him about what I thought I had learned, he threw out some other perspectives as well. What I will say broadly is you will occasionally have those spectacular bosses that are really invested in making sure that you have what you need to succeed. When they offer that to you, take it, embrace it, value it. Take the notes, make sure you internalize it's like what it is that you are learning from them so that you can take that going forward. And if you want to be a spectacular boss going forward, make sure that you are investing some of your time into the people that are underneath you so that you are giving them the lessons that will allow them to be great leaders going forward.
Thanks, Derek. That paying it forward really resonates. Maureen, any thoughts? Oh, I think Maureen might still be having some technical difficulties.
I was
So
on
Rory,
mute.
oh, there. Okay, there you go.
Sorry. So I did have some difficulties in the beginning, and so this question was really around, I think, training and development that stands out. So I think that there's certainly the opportunity to recognize what it is that you need, and to Derek's point, be able to pay that forward, right? Because we didn't get here by ourselves, and we should not expect that the individuals that are coming up with us or behind us should do the same. And so I do agree with Derek that it's an opportunity to be self-aware, recognize what it is that you need, get it, but then always be able to pay it forward.
Thank you. Anything from the audience? Any questions or thoughts? Okay.
I have a question.
Please.
Just curious, Derek, you had mentioned informal investments in others, and I think Maureen mentioned paying things forward. Just curious in terms of your career path and what you've done thereafter. Like, is that something that you've provided to other people, or just things that you've received?
I have valued it so much that I would like to believe that it is something that people that have worked for me will also feel that they have taken from me. My style is very different about how I'll sort of pass it on than sort of some of my previous bosses' style, but my intent is very much the same. And the thing that I have always valued when you think about those development opportunities is try to make sure that people understand the principles as opposed to any specific learning on for any specific task. I was at Procter for about 5 years, and I think one of the great things that Procter does in the development of people is they really make sure that they teach people principles about how to think about being a great marketer and running a business and all of that. So whenever I provide feedback to folks or provide learning opportunities, we'll talk about the specific incident, but I always also try to make sure that I bring it back to the principle that underlies it.
And Ariola, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Yes. I would just like to add on to what Derek said, which is around, leadership style and recognizing, what you're leadership style is, and then being able to parlay that into a way that allows others to grow and develop. So Derek, like you, I think my leadership style is very, very different. I am, one, very inclusive, not just of people, but in terms of their thought process, their thinking, or what they want to do with their careers. If they want to go in different directions and navigate that differently, let's talk about what that looks like. So at the end of the day, it is not just a success point for the organization, but it's successful for you as well.
Great, great. Thank you both. Adola, thank you for asking that great question. Okay, under the guise of career growth, let's look at another question. Looking back on your career growth, was it more of a ladder or a spider web? And what do you see in today's corporate environment as it relates to career development and the ability to progress? And Maureen, let's kick it off with you this time.
Sure, thank you. So I would say mine is definitely more of a spider web. So if you think about a spider web, and I'm pretty grossed out by spider webs, by the way, but if you really think about a spider web, or if I think about it, we know that they're built from a thread that starts on the outside first and then then inside out, right? So, as they first build a bridge, let's say from one branch to another, then they utilize another branch to utilize as an anchor. And so once that's actually locked down, the spider itself starts to work on the main structure of the web, which ends in a spiral, but again, starts on the inside. So when I think about my career, I started my career in retail as an assistant store manager, then as an assistant buyer for a large, well-known retailer. And then I went to work for as an administrator for a small tech firm, and then a facility specialist responsible for the design and build out of office space for a large insurance company. And so the anchor throughout all of that was the ability to really impact people in some way, shape, or form in every single one of those roles, but across different sectors and actually industries. And so once I recognized that common thread, I knew where I wanted to be, and that was in a role that engaged people, but also allowed people to develop and grow in their careers. And that's ultimately what led me to HR. And so like a spider web, my career has been full of turns in areas such as HR leadership, talent development, talent acquisition, employee culture, but ultimately all throughout HR. So that is the big web. And then ultimately leading me to where I am today, which is in inclusion and belonging. And so today, I think people, particularly from a Gen Z population perspective, are looking for ways to explore and develop in different disciplines. And as leaders, I think it's, our responsibility to really think about being open and creating opportunities for people that allow them to discover their anchor and build out their web through varied experiences. And this isn't just beneficial for the organization, but it also creates a talent pool that has diversity of thought leadership and expertise that is really transferable across numerous industries and sectors.
Thank you for that, Maureen. Any of our other panelists want to dive in on that?
Yeah, sure. So, I would say that, as it concerns maybe moving up the org chart, it's so far very much been a ladder. But if I think about it through the lens of actual, progression and development, in many ways it was a spider web in the sense that I started my career in management consulting. And then, after transitioning into HR, initially was in business-facing HR, then spent some time in executive compensation. Ultimately, after spending some significant time as a business partner, one of the key defining moments in my career was being asked to move into a global benefits COE within HR, which was not something that I would have otherwise envisioned my career doing. But I trusted the HR leaders that were telling me to take that opportunity with my development, and in fact ended up turning into a huge opportunity where I started to get significant interface with the C-suite. Worked on some large scale enterprise initiatives that had huge balance sheet impacts, and you created a lot of visibility both for myself and the teams that I was a part of throughout the firm, and then ultimately ended up taking me down a career path that I wouldn't have initially thought, but a very young age, before I was 30 years old, was in front of preparing meeting materials for comp committees of the board, working with CEOs and CHROs, and that was just something that really happened because I said yes. And so I would say that my recommendation there, if you're thinking about kind of today's corporate environment, it's being agile, being open to different experiences, and if there are senior level leaders that are investing in you, and the opportunity sounds like it's interesting, take advantage of it if you can.
Thank you, Rory. It sounds like, again, be open to the possibilities, even if it's something that might push you a little bit outside your comfort zone.
Can I put one build on top of this, Angela?
Please, Derek.
So I think it's really important to accept that you need to manage your own career. And from that perspective, I think that at any point in time, you have to have a destination in mind. That is where you are trying to be able to achieve, where you're trying to get. It's like that destination can change, but at one point you have to know where it is you're shooting for, and then you have to make sure that you're letting people know kind of what that destination is, so they can then help think about how to be able to move you sort of down that path. One very quick anecdote I'll provide around this is I once told my boss that I did not want his job. It was sort of up the path to vice president of marketing. And I said, it's a functional job. It's like, it's not what I'm interested in. I want to be a line and general manager. So that's kind of what the next role was that I was actually looking for. Literally 4 months later, I went back to him and I said, thought about it, I've changed my mind. I want your job because this is what I want to be able to do for the company. A month and a half after that, I got his job as he moved into something else. So, weird that in such a short period of time, it really did, as far as the feedback that I had provided him, change my perspective, but it did allow me to get that position. And it was something that at the time that I had decided that it was something that I wanted to be able to do for the company overall, because I thought that I could bring real value as I stepped within that. So just make sure that you're managing your path, make sure you're letting other people know, and know that whatever you tell them doesn't mean that you're going to be fixed in that forever.
Very good, very good. Well, before I move on to our next topic around navigating the corporate landscape, I'm going to take a pause and see if there's anything in the chat or if anyone in the audience has any questions.
Hi, Angela. My name's
Hi.
LaRonda. Thank you for this panel. Thank you to everyone. And I guess I wanted to ask, Derek, that was great advice. And Maureen, I enjoyed hearing you as well, and wondered if the two of you could speak to gender differences. Because Derek, I have experience, come from a family of all brothers and a lot of uncles, and they tell me things and I go, I've tried those things, and as a woman, I find that they don't work for me. And so maybe you could address that a little bit. And it's these subtle differences that, strength in a woman is seen differently in the workplace than strength in a man.
I would like to believe that is evolving now. It is clearly a lot of baggage. And in the role that I'm in now, I see that particularly Black women are experiencing corporate America very differently than either white women or men broadly, sort of across it. So I know that there are some sensitivities to that. That said, how you deliver the message is where I would say is where you need to make sure that we're accommodating. But that you deliver that message, I think, is still really important for career development. And it can never hurt you to let people know what it is that you want.
Derek, so LaRonda, thank you for the question. Derek, completely agree with you. I think that it is definitely evolving. I love that word. And it is very different. It is changing for Black women, for Black and Indigenous people of color in general, right? But it is, I will be very honest and say, it is slow moving change, right? And so I think that we need to be very conscious and aware of the opportunities that are actually in front of us, and get ourselves a little comfortable with being uncomfortable in asking for what it is that we want. And I think, and I'm going to speak for myself, throughout my career, I haven't always been comfortable in that space, right? But it's taken me some time and some experiences, lessons learned, moments when I failed slowly. So it took me some time to get back up, to realize that I needed to ask for the opportunities that I wanted, because if we don't ask for it, there's no reason we should expect it's just going to fall in our laps. And we have to be very determined and exercise gravitas in doing so. And I think that will make a world of a difference, particularly in this place and time when we know that we do have some power here right now in this moment. So we need to really be courageous and think about what it is we want and how to ask for that.
And Maureen, one last sort of really quick add. Frame it as well in what it is that you're going to do for the company, not just what you want. That is, you want a particular role because you think you're going to be able to bring this kind of impact and this kind of change that you would like to bring to it. That helps them think about sort of why you're giving them the why.
Love that, Derek and Maureen. The value, know the value proposition on both sides for you as well as what you can do for the organization. All right, thank you, Loranda, for that great question. Let's move into our next category. And Loucious, if you don't mind, I'm going to start with you. So in talking about navigating the corporate landscape, Loucious, in regards to relationships and sponsorship, what approaches have been effective in creating and fostering those relationships of who you know, and how do you position yourself so that they know, more importantly, about you?
Thank you so much for that, Angela. You know, as a lot of people know me, know a lot of times I say it's not what you know and it's not who you know, but who knows you, and more importantly, what do they know about you, right? And if you think about the question that you asked, Loranda, I tell people, you know, one thing about me is my career kind of like a spider web also. But one of the things that if you think about that piece with the question that you just raised, before I get into actually answering that specifically, I would like to go back and just say one thing that's really important for me has been emotional intelligence, right? Focus on emotional intelligence. And, you know, I was just kind of like pull something up now, as we know there's really 4 parts of emotional intelligence. And I had everyone on my team, I purchased a book for them called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And the reason I did that is because the first thing it talks about is self-awareness. Sometimes we're so busy focusing on other people and why we view things, and this happened a lot with me, that we really need to focus a lot more on ourselves. The self-piece is once we focus on the self-awareness, how do I self-manage myself, right? To know, because I may be thinking I'm doing the right thing and totally be doing the wrong thing. And again, you know, control the people that you're trying to help reach out to you to do all those things that Derek and Maureen discussed. The third 2 piece of that is social awareness and relationship management. And the reason that social awareness and relationship management piece is so important, because going to the question that Angela mentioned a minute ago, is about career development and managing and building relationships. I say to people all the time is, you know, don't just build one relationship. We seem to think that when we have to reach out for managing, for mentoring, there should be one person. I ain't gonna say I'm just speaking from Loucious' perspective. When I first started out as a young 17-year-old in the Army, and I was always looking for males or Black males to mentor me. And guess what? I got disappointed time after time after time. I've been retired from the Army for almost 20 years now. I've been in corporate in the government for 17 years, and I can count the number of mentors, African-American males I've had on less than one hand, maybe 3. So expand your career development at your career team. They don't have to always be people that look like you, but invest in people that care about you. Second phase that you mentioned about things are different from women and males, I totally agree. My primary mentor and coach is a female, right? I mentor and coach a lot of women, but I always thought I would at Emotional Intelligence 2.0 with them. Why? Because they need to know a little bit about themselves so they can understand what I say. They may not be receiving it the way that I'm saying it because their socializer background and things of that nature are different than mine. So we have to set that tone first. And then I tell them, hey, find not only mentors, but sponsors, right? And another good book is Microaggressions and Microinequities in Everyday Life. The reason I share that book with you, because when you read that book, it's going to confirm the things that you already said, that there's challenge that based off race and gender and sexual orientation that we have to deal with. It may make you angry at first because it's going to confirm that those things are there, but it's not to make you angry. It's to give you tools on how am I going to deal with this and overcome this stuff so that it's not going to impact me from achieving my career goals and objectives. So I would just sum it up by saying, have a multitude of mentors and sponsors, mentorship, lead the sponsorship, develop a portfolio of relationships, and then please, if y'all don't hear anything else I say today, after you build your relationships, maintain those relationships. I'm where I'm at today because of maintenance of relationships. The gentleman who helped me to get back in this career field was a gentleman I met in 1997. We stayed in touch until I retired in the Army in 2002. And he stayed my mentor until he died in 2013, right? He was constantly sponsoring me and telling me places to go. I mentioned speak out to a lot of people. My wife and I were just talking yesterday, and this is my final point. I want to get someone else the opportunity to say something. And she was talking about, I'm always looking for people. I just met a young lady today, and I signed her if I would tell her to get in touch with me about an internship program. I met her because of her great customer service in Lowe's. I met a young African-American male, and he found out he was in IT, but he was working in Best Buy. And his girlfriend, his wife who worked there, was advocating very hard for him. My wife is a senior manager in IT for NASA. I gave her his information. He contacted her one time. We was going to mentor him. They didn't have a position open for him at the time. We said, but hey, stay in touch with us. Since that time, they've had 10 jobs that he possibly qualified for. But guess what? He never followed up. So my point is to all of us, it's not just about building a relationship, it's about maintaining a relationship. I hope to have a relationship with every person on this call. Angela have reached out to me a couple times. She even contacted me at the loss recently of my sister. You would thought we've known each other forever, but you never know how long those relationships is going to sustain. So once you build a relationship, have a diverse pool of people that you work with, then maintain it. Thank you.
Thank you, Loucious. All right, panelists, anyone else want to chime in? All right. Let me just check the chat and see if we have a question. All right, so let's move to the next section. Let's talk about excelling in your career. What has been the most beneficial career advice you have received or that you would give someone, either just starting out or midway in their career, to maximize their career progression going forward? And I'd love for each one of you to have a few minutes to chime into this one. But with that, Rory, let's start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say that there are a couple of things. One, just having a reputation, making sure that you develop a reputation as a team player and someone that's invested in other people's success. Ultimately, if you climb high enough in your career, you're eventually going to be leading people that at one point were peers, and in some cases you'll even be leading people that at one point were your managers. And so just developing a reputation and becoming someone that people would want to work for is something that can be extremely value added. I would say that the other piece, and this builds on something that Derek was saying earlier in the conversation, is don't be afraid to say what it is that you want to do. Almost from the point that I started my HR career, I was letting senior HR executives in the company know that one day I wanted to become a chief human resources officer. And one of the things that I got back from that is a lot of really good feedback on the sorts of things that were critical experiences and capabilities that were important to stepping into those roles. So yeah, again, I'd say it's managing that reputation, developing the perception, and through authentic actions with people that you are a team player, and then just being kind of vocal and transparent about what it is that you'd like to do with your career.
Great. Derek, your thoughts? Oh, go ahead, Maureen.
Oh no, sorry, go ahead. I'll weigh in very quickly because there's a similar thread to what Rory just mentioned. So it's not so much about the career advice that I received. It was more around career advice that I didn't know I needed and recognized it somewhere along the way, just through, some other faux pas that happened. But, this time I failed up. So I, Alice Walker, so we all know her, poet, Pulitzer Prize winning author of The Color Purple, said something that I read years ago, but not far enough back for it to have had an impact on me in this particular moment, but it stuck with me. She said, the most common way people, give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. And so, many of us, myself included, used to think about and complain about not being invited to the party, right? So once I was invited to an event by a senior leader in the organization I was working for at the time, I accepted the invitation, but on the day of the event, I said, you know what, I'm not going to go. I didn't decline, which is my first mistake. I just didn't show up. And I honestly thought out of all the people who would be there were some 60 or 70 people who were invited. No one was going to miss me. And so the morning after the event, I walked into the building, right into the person who invited me. And he said, "Good morning, Maureen. We missed you last night." And in that moment, I realized my career mistake. Again, it wasn't just that I hadn't declined. It was more so that I thought no one would miss me, because in my mind, I had no power in the organization yet. And clearly, this was not the case. So here's the thing, and Rory, you spoke to this, whether you know it or not, people are watching, people are paying attention to you. And as Loucious mentioned earlier, it's not about what you know, it's about who knows you. They want to see you, they want to see how you expand your thinking, your visibility, broaden your skill sets. And by the way, who's important to you as it relates to your relationships. And so to maximize on career progression, I'd say that we always need to remember that no matter what role we hold in our organization, we always have power. We just need to be self-aware. It's a common thread throughout this entire conversation, right? So be self-aware enough that we, one, recognize that power, and then two, put it to good use in our careers, for our organizations, our future endeavors, and do all of that with an eye out for paying it forward every single time.
Maureen, that's very powerful. Derek.
Get three very quick considerations when you think about managing your career. One, you have to be able to influence people. Everybody sells. You are selling yourself, you are selling your ideas, you're selling your need for resources. Get comfortable with the idea that you are going to have to sell, and figure out, take lessons, read books, whatever, how to be able to do that, because that will make you more successful going forward. Second, lead something. At the end of the day, you are hired because somebody expects you to deliver some kind of change, not to do as it is done, but to do it better, or to bring something else to whatever it is that you're working on. It doesn't have to be your own idea. You can champion somebody else's idea, make sure you give them credit for it, but you need to really think of yourself as responsible for bringing change to the job to whatever job that you are working in right now. Last piece that I'd say is be your authentic self. One quick anecdote here. I have lots of anecdotes along the way. I have a very loud, boisterous laugh. I was looking at trying to make the threshold jump from director to VP. And my boss at the time sort of pulled me aside and said, "Derek, the work is good, but when you think about executive presence, your laugh is like really loud, and it sort of goes throughout the floor, and you might really think about sort of tempering your laugh." I literally took that home with me, the thought. He told me this on a Friday. I remember this very vividly. He told me this on a Friday, and I went home and thought about, was this a change that I wanted to bring to myself so that I could accomplish my ambition? And at the end of the day, I said, no, actually, my laugh is part of what I like about myself, and it's a really important part of me. And if at the end of the day, if that's something that's going to prevent me from becoming a VP here, so be it. I will go somewhere else where it's going to work. So that was too important a part of for me to think about changing to be able to get to the ambitions that I wanted to get to. So you need to make sure that you are your authentic self, and if whoever you are doesn't work in the organization that you're in, go somewhere else where it's going to work for you.
I like that. Loucious, you want to close out this question?
Oh, wow. Yes, thank you. All the information is so awesome. Really keep coming back to me, the emotional intelligence, everything that Derek is saying and Maureen is saying, we're telling you, you got to really focus on yourself. But if I were going to add something to that also, I would say the organization matters too, right? Get to know and understand your organization. Be strategic in the things that you do. And as Derek said about leading, but don't be afraid to seek leadership. Oftentimes I speak to people of color and they're great at doing the work, carrying out the work, but we don't necessarily focus on leading the work. And keep in mind, when you talk about emotional intelligence, studying yourself is also about studying others. to this day, I would like to say that things have changed, but to this day, there's a lot of people not used to having people of color, and particularly women. If you look at some of the election, that was the biggest challenge. People just could not see, no matter how qualified a person was, they could not allow themselves to be led by a woman, no matter how good he or she may have been. So you learn those things so that you can prepare yourself to manage the person who may not want you to manage them, but seek those leadership opportunities, but prepare yourself for those opportunities before you fall into them. You know, Derek mentioned that he was an officer in the military. I wasn't. I was a senior non-commissioned officer. And I tell everyone, in the Army, we do not teach senior non-commissioned officers how to be managers. We teach you how to be leaders, and we teach you how to supervise. My role was always to supervise someone. No matter how high I went up, my primary responsibility was supervising. Derek, as an officer, we teach officers how to manage. You know, you managing resources, you managing people. I'm going to direct the people based off what management and guidance that he or she gave them. Self-assessment again, go back and look at yourself and see, what are you prepared to do? Are you prepared to lead? Have you had the right trainings and skills to lead? Do you have the right development people to help you develop to particularly, you know, manage and to lead? Are you stuck in supervisory mode? You know, and so those are two of the things that I would say focus on. And then finally, some of the good advice that I receive is don't chase the grade, chase the work. But chase work that you are capable and that you know that you have the skill to do. And when you see that studying your organization, that is the work need to be done, that's when you want to find out the people who are leading that project ahead of time, get to know, interact with them, having some conversations, make yourself uncomfortable or hanging in a different group that you may not have hung with before, find out what the work is. And then, as we have said earlier, I believe it was either Maureen or Derek who said it, introduce yourself to them, right? Introduce yourself to them and what your capabilities are, because there's a lot more people who look for people who are successful to help them be successful. And that's what happened with me all throughout my life. When people know that you got something that you bring to the table that will help them achieve their goals and objectives, guess what? They're willing to carry you along with them, right? They'll be telling you about the position before you have to apply for the position. And if you're applying for the position when it first come out on the job announcement, that's good. But sometimes you're old school, we say a day late and a dollar short. So that would be my thing, is continue to build those relationships, get to know your organization extremely well, know what is the reason they do what they do, and then find where you fit in that you can accomplish work in that particular organization to help them be successful. And then work in the areas of your strength, because sometimes you may get stuck in a job a little bit longer than you want to, and you want to stay motivated. And if you end up working in a job that you really don't like, then sometimes your attitude may be reflecting that, and then that can have a negative impact on your career as well.
Thanks, Loucious. I want to ask a quick question. Any of you guys on the panel can jump in, but many of you have spoken to sponsorship, seeking out people that are doing things or have attributes around their style or their leadership that resonate with you. Can any one of you who wants to chime in talk about mentorship, specifically the importance of it, and how do you go about establishing and finding a mentor and driving that as a mentee?
I think that depends on the organization and culture, and that some things are better received in certain companies. That said, I think that a consistent piece there is just understanding the strategic priorities of your organization, understanding what's important to the leaders that are in the sorts of jobs that you'd one day like to be in, and looking for ways to get visibility and to demonstrate value in places where those folks are going to be looking. And then if you do that, then opportunities tend to come out of that. To think about an example of that, early on in my career, one of the things that I kind of understood is that there were just a lot of things that were going on in the executive compensation landscape around CEO pay and all these other things, just because of the fact that there had just been some broader macroeconomic things that had driven some of those things being important in the organization that I was at. And just demonstrating to senior leaders in the company that I understood those things and why they were important, and looking for opportunities to have lunch with and have dialogues with them, not only about those items, but also the company as a whole. Started to raise my profile in the organization, and with that, some of the projects that I got attached to. So I'd say just being aware of the priorities of those key stakeholders.
Yes,
Thank you.
can I add
Go ahead,
a little bit
Deb.
to that?
Yes.
Yeah, and just, you know, a lot of organizations, I know at NASA, we have formal and informal mentoring programs. I tell a lot of our people of color, you know, I'm always looking around. I know exactly how many people we have at Marshall Space Flight Center. I can tell you how many African American, Native American, Hispanic Americans, et cetera, that we have on site. I know almost every one of them out of our 2,500 personnel, right? When we have formal mentoring events and programs like that, I'm looking. I'm looking to see who's showing up. I'm looking at the ones that I've talked to, and then they sometimes will give me their excuses for not showing up. When we have other events, right? When you have social events in a lot of organizations, if you have all hands meetings and things of that nature, I'm looking. I'm looking to see who's out there in the audience. Yes, you can sit there, you can watch it on a television because we make all that access available. But guess what? That 1% of the senior executive leaders, the decision makers, when they are there in that audience or when they're part of that mentoring program, they don't see you on television. That's a good opportunity to go up to people and to introduce yourself. And because a lot of them are looking for people of color and people that don't look like them to mentor. We have formal mentoring programs. So I tell folks, you know, people, you have to go out. You have to be out there. You have to get out of your uncomfort zone and then talk to other mentors to get them to introduce you to someone else who may be looking for a mentor in your particular career field and your particular area. But not only go to formal and informal mentoring events, right? But also go to those other events and activities that your organization have. Those, like I said earlier, those those all hand meetings or any formal event that they have that's there, as Maureen mentioned, that you may or may not show up to, go there. And don't just hang with the people that look like you. Practice work in the room, practice your 2-minute elevator speech. But I would already have a list of those people I was hoping would be there doing the type of work that I hope to do. And I would go up and introduce myself to them. Right. And I would find out what projects and things of that nature that I can get engaged in and participate in. That's what I did, how I got my first job working for Pratt & Whitney. I was actually trying to impress this African-American male who was the head of human resources for AFLAC, and the director for the vice president for human resources at Pratt & Whitney overheard me telling him what I could do. And she was a white female. Next thing I know, 2 weeks, I had an invite to come out to Pratt & Whitney. A month later, before I retired from the Army, I was hired. I had to, of course, work on a project. I volunteered to work on a project for them. Next thing I know, they was laying a contract out in front of me and asked me, would this be acceptable for me? So, you know, work the room. Don't be afraid to work the room. Practice with each other. It's nothing wrong with practice with other people, you know, to say, hey, how did this feel go over? And again, you're talking to a lot of people who have been successful here. If they willing to volunteer information to help you out, I would stay in touch with them.
Thanks, Loucious. Derek, were you trying to get
just
in?
a really quick thing on mentors and sponsors. Mentors really
Please.
important. They help you navigate the organization. They provide you coaching on sort of how to improve in the work that you're doing. But if you want to advance, you need to find a sponsor. Sponsors are the people that actually pull you up in the organization. They are somebody that is in your line, that knows you, knows your work. You want to create, and really importantly, there's this anecdote that says that men have sponsors, women have mentors. So even as a woman, it's really important that you develop sponsors within the organization. The first, best, most important way to do that is be great at the job that you are doing. It's like you have to be standout and exceptional, because if you will, you want in a sponsor's mind somebody to think about you as somebody that if they left the company, they would want to take you with them. And they're only going to want to do that if they think that you're great at the job that you're doing. You also have to be able to build a personal relationship with them so they know who you are. If you golf or you play tennis, great, leverage that kind of thing. If you do not golf or play tennis, find some other way to be able to connect with those people that are in your line so that they understand who you are, and you can create a platform to develop a personal relationship with them. Cannot emphasize this enough. Nobody moves up to the top of the organization without having people that are sponsoring them along the way. So figure out how to be able to create sponsors within your organization.
Thanks, Derek. Thanks. Here's a question that came in. Maureen, you made a comment a few minutes ago about failing up. Can you and anyone else that might have something to chime in about that speak to what failing up looks like and how you recover and continue, you know, to move forward?
Sure. So thanks for the question. So failing up is really a series of things, right? It's a series of failures. And actually they're really good for your career, but they're mostly beneficial for your career. If one, you actually recognize that you failed, and two, you actually use that failure to change the direction, the trajectory of what happened when you failed. So, I will, and oh, the other piece to that is being open and honest and talking about it. So really acknowledging it, and again, being self-aware of it. So I'm just going to piggyback off of the story I shared about this. So when I was talking about failing upwards, I shared that, I was invited to this event, didn't go to the event, was acknowledged the next morning, or basically I was called out for not showing up for the event. And the individual who invited me was a very senior leader in the organization, but not just in the organization, in the HR organization. And I was a part of that organization. So right away, I recognized my failure just because I received the invite from this individual and did not do anything to take it up, meet other people, all of that. The way that you fail up is one that you recognize it. And so what I did was, every single time I had the opportunity to be in a meeting with him, even if the meeting had nothing to do with what my specific domain, I would always pay attention to what he was working on, what big projects he had going on, what deliverables he had coming down in the first, second, third quarter of this year, and figure out a way to engage myself and immerse myself in the work that he was doing, so that in essence, I was actually getting more visibility with him, getting closer to the work that he was doing, what was important to him and his overall HR organization. And to make a long story short, he sought me out, actually, not for one, not just two, but for 3 different opportunities after that time, after my first faux pas of just not going to the event that he invited me to at all. So I would say that failing up is really recognizing that you failed, acknowledging that, and figuring out a way to change the trajectory of that so it positions you in a better place. If you failed and there's some particular person who's been impacted by that, then connect yourselves with that person. That will help you gain a sponsor, direct to your point, because now this individual has seen me in different ways, different lights, different ways that I can be leveraged to support his organization, and then has reached back out to me to lead 3 key teams, 3 critical projects going forward over the next few years of my career at this organization.
Wow. Okay. A nice success story. Any of the other panelists want to chime in? I know, Amy, you have a question, and so we'll let you ask that as soon as we wrap this conversation up.
Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to fail. At the end of the day, you've got to take risks in terms of being able to try to lead and drive change. If at the end of the day it goes south on you, fine. You kind of get a year to break it and a year to fix it. So is the model that I generally keep in my head going forward. And you better learn from the mistakes. The first year that I picked up the Hidden Valley salad dressing business, this business that had been grown for many years, we indexed down 2% because of some changes that we'd made. I was doing great on other sides of the business. But the following year, because I had horrible nights of sleep during that year, all that business was going south. I was really worried about losing my job and sort of failing on this business. We really got in and diagnosed what was going on. We brought real changes to the way that we sort of took this brand to market. And the next year we grew almost 10%. So the key is, and this is what Maureen just said, you might break something, but fix it. And in fixing it, people will understand that, hey, you have the ability, there was a hiccup, make sure you can explain what the hiccup is, learn from it.
Great. Okay, Amy, please. Oh, I'm sorry, Rory, go.
I would really briefly add there is, it's being able to, when something doesn't work, seek out and receive constructive feedback. Early in my career, and this goes to Derek's point about being able to influence, I would put together what I thought were these kind of great proposals that were very well backed up, with whatever kind of data was necessary, and then I would get to meetings and then find that those things weren't successful, and then ultimately what I ended up getting in the form of feedback from C-level leadership is one, I wasn't being brief enough. I wasn't starting with the bottom line up front, and so I was losing people, and two, I wasn't pre-baking kind of consensus ahead of meetings. So much of being successful when you're trying to advance an important change is the meetings before the meetings. And so those were huge lessons that I learned early in my career, and I only learned them because I actually you kind of took the time to ask for and then accept that constructive feedback. So they were failures that translated into success as a result.
Thank you, Rory. A friend of mine gave me that BLUF, bottom line up front approach or framework. I've learned that too. All right, Amy, please. I heard you have a question.
Yep, sorry, I started to chat and then it got more complicated. So a couple of questions, like, so I'm an Xer, so I'm kind of in the middle of like our oldest people here, but also not the youngest people anymore. And so can you give us some advice on like generational things? When Derek mentioned the book, I have a hard time sometimes getting people to still read books. And like, that's so important. I read a book a week, so I know I have probably a bias towards people who read books, but also this idea that people can just kind of come to work and be not maybe their authentic selves, like maybe a little too authentic. And as the most senior African-American, often people will come to me and want me to counsel them on how they sound or how they dress, or even how their hair is styled. And so I have natural hair, it's just straight today because I have to color it. But the point is, like, but it's a thing, right? Like, that's a whole, like, and like the young people are like, can I wear my hair natural? I'm like, because I have natural hair. I'm modeling this for you. And on the other hand, I know that still in corporate space, there's still some expectation that Black women look like Claire Huxtable and sound like Claire. And so how do you balance like my love and affection for my people and like still give you advice, like, but you can't wear that, and you can't say all of that. Like, I know what you're getting at. Like, there's real and then there's a little too real, because like we pay you, right? And so how do you, and I feel like my generation has caught in between because the conversations are so raw, from the younger generation, and my elders are a little more used to compliance. And so I feel sometimes really caught in the middle. Any advice?
Wow, that's a great question, Amy. And I will throw it out to the panelists. I see them all a little chomping at the bit. So I want to be sensitive to time. So if you've got one or two brief things, to help Amy from a perspective, please go ahead. Maureen, let's start with you, and then we'll go Maureen, Rory, Derek, and Loucious.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, because we do say, organizations today do say, bring your whole self to work, be your authentic self. But I think that there is certainly a line, right? And the line should not be identified by, you need to look more like your white counterparts. The line should really be, what makes you comfortable? What pieces of you are your authentic self that will work in collaboration with the people whom you're working with, the company that you're working with, the culture of the organization that you're working with. I think as it's just humans in general, we have to have a really good understanding of what all of that is. The other piece is, I think we all need to be comfortable in our own space around what that looks like, what authenticity looks like for us. One of the places that I worked, I started working there, and I had very long locks. And I remember my mother-in-law saying to me, "You're never going to get a job with those things." And I got a job in 2 days, and it was literally 2 days after we had this conversation. And it was a critical and really important step in my career. But I also remember thinking, I had to do things to make sure that they were neat, right? To make sure that I came presentable. So it's a line, but you have to really think about, at the end of the day, what is the image? What is the perception you want people to have of you, of your knowledge, of your expertise, what you bring to the table, what you can deliver for the organization, for your team, for your clients. You have to think about all of that in totality.
Yeah, I mean, along those lines, I would say that the big piece is just understanding the culture of the organization that you're in, and the stakeholders that are involved in any given interaction. The way that I present myself, or the way that I may kind of dress or approach a meeting with my CEO is very different than the way that I would present myself if I was showing up into a global production environment. And dealing with stakeholders there. And so part of it is just recognizing, your audience there. And I think the other piece is similarly understanding from a cultural, standpoint that depending on, the organization that you're in, that can just have a different look and feel. If you're in a kind of, startup in a tech, firm on the West Coast, they're just different, kind of norms and behaviors, regardless of, your demographic, your background or cultural legacy, than if you're maybe in a kind of legacy financial services firm that's been around for 100+ years. And so it's just understanding that environment, and you're kind of observing against that context just how far, to your point, Amy, you can go and being real versus get too real, if you will.
Everybody puts on some kind of mask when they come to work, because you can't be, the you that wakes up in the morning and that's hanging out with your friends and kind of interacting that way when you come into the office. But you still need, you've got to bring that person in, but with a professional demeanor to be able to do it. And that is a mask that I think that everybody puts on. It does not recognize that for Blacks and other minorities in particular, on top of that, I just have to be professional. I usually also have to change the way that I am, change the way that I interact to be able to be acceptable to, or non-threatening might be another way to characterize it, to many of the white, particularly the elder white folks that happen to be around in an organization. So the key is know that your authentic you does not mean your casual you. It means that you're professional you when you come into the office.
I agree with Derek. Derek and I gotta have some conversations later on. I love for us to just chit chat, right? We look at things the same and different, and have different perspectives and spins on it as well. I would say to everyone, and I'm an EEO practitioner as well as diversity and inclusion practitioner. One thing that I'm proud of myself on is that I do handle complaints of discrimination from our space flight center. I also pride myself that we have the lowest complaint ratio of almost any federal agency. Right? That don't mean we have issues, right? We have concerns. And I say to a lot of my people of color, race matters, but it alone does not determine your fate, right? One of the things I would share with you also is that sometimes the biggest racists are other people of color. And you want to talk to me about it offline, because I know we have a lot of time now. I'd be more than happy to have that conversation with you. But when we talk about culture, there's the organizational culture, and then there's the organizational culture sometimes of people in power of other people of color, how they think you should be, know, and do, and act. And sometimes that is based off their own values and belief in socialization. Oh my God, you're going to mess it up for us. So they may be the ones who telling you, hey, why are you wearing your hair natural? Oh, why are you wearing those braids? Hey, you need to tone your tone down, but there'll be another person who's screaming across the table, to the point that Rory made. Get to understand and know your culture, but not trying to scare anybody. But don't always think that it's the older, elder white male or white female that may be having that challenge with you. It could be the people that sitting across the table from you who look exactly like you and think that you're supposed to act and behave a certain way that has nothing to do with the organization. To Rory's point, I would say, just because the organization say they value, that not that they value diversity, but they value inclusion, ensure that they actually value inclusion. And make sure that anyone in the C-suite or anyone else value inclusion. If there's an Asian American in there, you can do your own little test. I test people all the time. I try to find out how much do other people know about my culture, right? And so when they know about my culture, what do they really think of me when I'm walking into that room? I don't get that information so it will deter me. I get that information so I can use it to determine how am I going to present, as we said earlier, my authentic self. Because the worst thing you can do is change who you are. But there may be some things you need to change, because you may not be being your authentic self. You may be being what other people have told you that you are. That's why your self-awareness of getting to know who you really is and who you really are is critical. It's extremely important, because sometimes people try to make us think that we one way, that's who we are, and that's not who we are at all. I hope that makes sense. But my thing again is, we have to be prepared. You have to be prepared to deal with people that look like you, and you have to be prepared to deal with people that don't necessarily look like you, because even the ones that look like us, and I just sum up with this. Carter G. Woodson laid out his book, The Miseducation of the Negro. Sometimes the Negro don't know that the Negro has been miseducated. And that's where sometimes we put a culture on each other that makes it harder for us to adapt and work in any social economic environment.
All right, Loucious, thank you. Thank you all for that. I'm going to turn it back over to Douglas.
Thanks, Angela. And thanks everyone for joining. And thank you, panelists. And Angela, thank you so much for moderating our event this afternoon. If anyone has any follow-up questions or thoughts, feel free to connect with our panelists on LinkedIn. As a friendly reminder, we will be hosting our next virtual roundtable next Friday, April 2nd, centered around establishing, scaling, and improving DEI initiatives. We will be sharing a survey tomorrow after the event, and we appreciate your feedback. And again, thanks for everyone for joining, and look forward to seeing you at our next event.